In this video, I'm going to share my initial impressions of the Behringer MS-1 MKii. I've had the synth for a couple of weeks now and I've started to get used to what it can and cannot do. This video is not a full-on review, as that's not what I'm doing here. Instead, it's basically what I feel about this synth in the context of me spending £212 on it. And I think that's a really important point. Anyone who's making really harsh judgments should factor in the price. Sure, at this price point there are going to be some compromises, and that may mean that synth is not for you. However, to totally put down a device without considering how much it costs doesn't seem like a fair reflection. With that in mind, I thought I'd first look at the build quality. First thing you notice when you take the MS-1 MKii out of the box is how heavy and substantial it feels. Sure, it's a plastic enclosure, but over 4 kilograms in weight, it really has some heft to it. And in contrast to my Arturia Keylab Essentials 61, which has a much larger footprint, that is a lot lighter. The plastic enclosure feels like it's made from the same sort of material Behringer make their foot pedals out of. And as a foot pedal material, I'd be reluctant to jump up and down on it too much, but as a synth enclosure it feels like it will be sturdy and last for a good long while. The knobs and sliders all feel robust. I'm not too heavy-handed when it comes to playing synths, so I'm confident that this will stand up to normal use, especially for me. The one area where I'm more concerned about the build quality, and something I'll use with caution, is the bender control. To me this feels like it might be the weakest link, and I'll therefore be making sure that I'm gentle when I'm using it, because it doesn't feel like it's going to take too much of a battering. And maybe in the context of this synth, it just feels a little bit fragile in comparison to the rest. When I look at the keyboard action, it's good but not great. I prefer the playability of the Keylab Essentials from Arturia. The keyboard send and receive MIDI data either through the 5-pin DIN ins and outs or over USB, but what is a shame is that the faders don't send nor receive MIDI control data, so as a result it's not a replacement for a MIDI controller. MIDI CC data would have been useful, as its implementation in the Behringer Pro 800 means I can play and automate the synth remotely. For me, this is the biggest weakness of the MS-1 MKii, as I'm using the synth in a home studio context, and having the ability to automate from Ableton Live would have made this so much more flexible for me. The sound of the MS-1 MKii is different to most of the other analog synths I own, and I think that's partly because it's only got one oscillator, which can be beefed up with a sub oscillator, but it gives what I'd class as a brittle sound. Yes, it can be big and punchy, but it has different tonal characteristics to say the Pro 800, and sounds very different to my Novation Bass Station 2. They are both excellent analog synths, but for me this is actually a real benefit, that I don't want a bunch of synths that all sound the same. So the fact that it's got those different tonal characteristics is a real winner for me. It's also really immediately playable. There's no menu diving and very few things to learn out of the box, so you can start making interesting sounds almost right away. If you watch a few YouTube videos, it's easy to get the MS-1 MKii to perform a variety of sounds and has enough flexibility to be useful either as a bass or lead synth. And the filter is actually really nice and squelchy, so you can push it to a more acidic style of music if that's what you're after. Aside from the lack of MIDI CC, the other thing which some people may have an issue with is the glide functionality. Glide or portamento does not apply when you're playing an arpeggio from the synth, and it doesn't kick in until you move the dial to probably 15%. And there's no general introduction of the glide, it sort of jumps in. Once enabled though, it does sound pretty good to me, and externally sequenced, the glide works on all manner of sequences. That includes fast arpeggio lines, so for me it's not a deal breaker. Others may find this foible a problem, but to me, in the context of a £212 synth, it's something I know I can live with. So in conclusion, the Behringer MS-1 MKii is a bit of a bargain. It's sturdy with some minor flaws, and definitely would sit well along other analog or digital synths that you might have already. To my ear it sounds a lot like the Roland SH-101 it's modelled on, but it's not a perfect replica, and I'm okay with that. The filter design is improved from what was on the Mark 1, and for many this makes the update worthwhile. With second-hand prices of SH101s around £1,200 today, it's hard to justify the cost. For those looking for a similar sound set, then considering the MS-1 Mark II might be the way forward, or a stopgap until you can afford the original. So what do you think? Is the MS-1 Mark II on your shopping list? Are you put off by the red colour, or is this just not for you? I'd be really interested to hear what you think. And if you're interested in Behringer gear and Behringer related content, then watch this video over here.